Okay, so I did another video where in like under 2 minutes I just sort of did this very rushed crash course of how you can extend djembe technique to get some other sounds beyond the three traditional tones of bass tone, open tone, and slap, to get a wider variety and extend the instrument and bring it into more of like a rock or jazz or blues context where you're kind of, in essence, quasi-emulating a drum set and playing the same kind of ideas, taking advantage of the fact that djembe has a really wonderful intervallic distance between the fundamental and the first overtone, so that you've got this wide, almost bass and snare kind of idea that's already staring you in the face. Anyway, today what I want to do is go through 22 total strokes / tones and variations thereof that get you 22 different ideas, sonic ideas that you can incorporate into your djembe playing. So this is kind of like a rock djembe player's, it's not exactly rudiments, but kind of like a rock djembe player's rudiments chapter 1. So, to start with, if you're brand new to djembe, let's go through the three basic tones. And already I'm going to get wonky. I'm going to actually split that into 4 basic tones. And so whatever hided hand percussion you're playing, there's some version of the bass tone, the open tone, and the slap. I'm going to actually split the slap tone into 2 separate techniques that have slightly different sounds. That you may want to play with and master. And that division becomes important later on when we get into the variations of how those tones can be used. So to start with, we've got the bass tone. This is achieved by using the heart of your palm here against an area that's just off center probably from your head. You're going to need to find the sweet spot, but what you're trying to get here is a nice resonant thud that's just the fundamental of this drum, kind of like a bass drum, but not really exciting much of the overtone. So that really is the boomy part of this drum in focus. It's important to note, again, if you're new to djembe, you need to either clasp this thing with your knees, or else use a strap like I'm using, so that you can tilt the bell forward a little bit, so that it is not flush on the ground. When the drum is flush on the ground, then this fundamental, this low tone will not sound. You have to let it lean in order for the bell to, in order for the drum to speak. So, let's give it a shot. Again, heart of my palm against an area that is near the center of the drum. And you can hear I'm mostly just getting a nice low note. If this was the surface of the drum, I'm keeping my fingers away. So although all these strokes are generally going to be a bounce, or you draw out, you'll notice that if I were in that moment of contact, my fingers are not touching the head of the drum. Second is the open tone, or just tone. This is going to be like a mitten. All 4 of your fingers together. You kind of keep your thumb out of the way, however it's convenient to you. It's not part of the stroke in any event, and if you're hitting the drum with your thumb, you probably should kind of practice repositioning your hands a little bit. So it's lightly cupped, and again, if this is the surface of the drum, it's going to be like clapping at the moment of contact. All 4 of my fingertips, all 4 of my actual finger digits from the knuckle on are going to be in contact with the drum, but I'm bouncing and drawing that sound out. So in terms of hand positioning, it is further back. Your palm should now be completely off the drum. And it's just allowing you at this sort of outer rim, or sort of picture this outer diameter, the mantle of the earth or whatever, the crust of the earth that you're going to strike here. So here's what it sounds like. It's bringing in that first overtone, that high pitch, that first dominant high pitch. So we get the bass, and the tone. The next one is the slap tone. Now I'm going to break this, as I mentioned, into two separate techniques which have two slightly different tones. Traditionally, here's what you'd be doing is whereas we had this sort of tight mitten, you're going to loosen your fingers, and instead of coming down to sort of rest easy here, you're going to tilt just ever so slightly so that your loosened fingers kind of hit and slap and have a little cup space on the surface. So again, now I'm going to show you head on. My hand is going to strike like this. Okay. But it's going to strike in the same location as the tone. So we've got, and you can hear how that's sharper. It's starting to bring the next harmonic up, the next overtone up. This even higher pitch starts to blend in and give it kind of a little bit of a scream. So again, we got the regular tone, and then the slap tone. I'm going to add an additional slap tone, I'm going to call the high slap, which is going to be your fingertips alone, right at the rim of the drum. And by the rim, I mean right over the circle called the bearing edge, where the tension of the head is actually being drawn down onto the inner, carved or beveled surface of this wooden drum. So this is going to be, and you can hear how that's a little different from that mid slap tone. Okay, so those are the first four tones. We'll come back around in a moment to add some others that are some of the extensions. But the first thing that we're going to do is vary those four. And the first variation we're going to introduce is all four of those take on a totally different character if the head is muted. In other words, if I put my left hand flush against the head, kind of off to the side in the general region of the bass tone, but you actually can move it around and adjust pitch as well, which is in and of itself kind of an art and variation and extends these tones even further. But let's hear what it sounds like to use the bass tone, the open tone, the slap, and the high slap like this. So now we get the bass tone as more of a thud, but still unmistakably low. Now here's the tone or open tone, the mitten. There's still some meat to it, and you hear kind of the resonance of the space, but definitely a completely different character. Here is the mid slap, or the traditional slap tone. Still sharp, but very muted, and just kind of a, in itself, it's the distance between the slap tone and the open tone in this context shrinks, which is why it's nice to also make use of that high slap here, which is very different. Very high, very sharp. So that's the first set of variations. So now we're up to 8 sounds that we can get out of the head of this drum. The next set of variations is that we're going to take the tone and both slap tones, and we're going to use them with a harmonic application. So what that means is somewhere on this drum, and every drum's a little different, there are nodes of the drum. And this is akin to like when a guitar player might lightly touch the string right over, say, the 5th or 7th or 12th fret without actually fretting the note, and you get this sort of high harmonic, which is actually the suppression of the fundamental and letting the overtones ring out unhindered. This head is simultaneously oscillating with several different notes coming out of it, and what we want to do is suppress some of the lower ones and let the higher ones ring out more freely and more in focus. So on this particular drum, I'm pretty familiar with it, and hopefully I won't mess it up on this demonstration. I'm going to press very hard with 2 fingers just off the center of the head where I've experimented and found my sweet spot. And so I'm going to start with what that sounds like with the fingertip high slap. And you can hear how that is really in focus. That the high tone that's part of the high slap is now by itself and its own pitch, its own special tone. So here's again is the high slap, the traditional slap, and then open tone. And within those, obviously the pitch sounds kind of the same, but you'll note that they have differences, slight differences, subtle differences perhaps, but differences in terms of the actual attack is different sounding because it is different. The attack, the percussive sound of your hand hitting the head changes from the open tone to the traditional slap to the high slap, and that blends in with that pitch to give you some different options. It is worth noting that it doesn't do very much to do this harmonic strike and then do a bass tone. It's going to be pretty much indistinguishable from the muted bass tone, but it's a little different. I'm just not quite counting it as a variation yet. So now we're up to 11 with four basic strokes, those same four muted, and now three of them with a harmonic application. So now let's kind of go back to the top and talk about a couple of extended strokes that can also run through those same, or a subset of those same variations. So I'll introduce the idea of the one-handed flutter roll. This is going to be, for me, it's the thumb and my ring and pinky, and you're just wobbling it ever so lightly with your elbow. And this is going to be down near, I typically do this down near where I would do a bass stroke. The next one, and this is another finger technique, would be kind of like a tabla player, would be using a finger roll. You can put this anywhere on the head, obviously. You can go out here or down here. So in a sense, the technique, not so much a tone in and of itself, it has variations within that. You can note that I'm also using the next one, which is just a finger tap. Finger tap or a thumb tap. And I'll make quite a lot of use of the thumb tap when I'm muting because my thumb on the muting hand is still active. And so it can kind of take over the role of my left hand and can kind of ghost in some bass notes, if you will. So again, that's our flutter roll, our finger roll, which is taking some set of your fingers and just rolling them. And then a finger tap, which can be one or two fingers or your thumb, any variety of the use of just fingers without an accompanying wrist stroke. And with these finger taps, you can also have them be sticky, which is to say they stick to the head rather than bounce off the head, or you can have them bounce. Which brings another variety, which when I said 22, I'm actually going to give you many more with some of these other technical variations. So sticky strokes, where I take, that's a sort of a hybrid of the slap and the open, and I'm just letting my hand rest there. So here's a sticky stroke on the open tone, sticky stroke on the traditional slap, a sticky stroke on the fingertip or high slap, and a sticky stroke on the bass tone. Now, the sticky stroke on the bass tone, that really is pretty indistinguishable, but again, slightly different. Okay, so I've lost count I know that we're going to end up with more than 22. I thought I counted it out, but I forgot about sticky strokes, so there you go. Now let's talk about a whole other, and sorry, should have gone back and showed you that yes, you can do all of those finger strokes. Also could be with a mute. Also could be, some of them can work with harmonics. Because you're not putting as much energy into finger strokes, they don't necessarily light up harmonics as well, but you can always experiment with those things and get the best results that you can, and just play around and find what works for you. Now let's move on to a whole other family of strokes, which is brush strokes. So I'm going to give you 4 basic brush strokes that you can use. The first is a fast whisk, which is going to be like a back and forth or just unidirectional, but it's a quick, straight path with your fingers against, you want to get enough surface area, probably from this part, the same part you would use, same mitten that you would use, but straightened out. And the second one is a long circle. And this is going to be akin to what you do when you're stirring the soup with brushes on a snare drum. So and this is my whole hand is trying to pick up as I kind of drop my hand in from the fingertip to the entire hand and try to pick up as much surface on the stir as I can. And that swelling is part of the definition of the sound. And then the third one is going to be a short circle. This is usually something that you're going to combine with the large circle. Again, this is stirring the soup in jazz brush technique, where you're going to make a long circle with a quick little cul-de-sac that then kind of brings you back off and starts the pattern anew. So the quick circle again is just, the difference between this and the whisk, as you can hear, hopefully, is the continuous contact. That you're really controlling not just the one punctuation like with the whisk, but the sustain of a longer sound. And then finally, you've got scrapes. So a scrape would be that you're taking your fingertips or fingernails and making sort of a harsh, percussive, reiki kind of sound on the surface of the head. So that's 4 kinds of brushes. By and large, they're not going to respond to harmonics. They will still work if you are muted. And you can work them in together in combination. You can and then finally, there are sort of extended strokes where you're striking the body of the drum itself. So we might strike here with just forgotten what I want to call this, with a bowl slap or with a bell slap. The bell slap is going to be more like a cowbell. It's going to really pick up the tone of the drum. A bowl slap is just going to be a very wooden noise, a lot like I think they're called whip sticks, where it's 2 pieces of wood on a hinge that you slap and slap together as a sound effect. So it can be a little hard to get this balanced right, and it can put you at a little bit of a disadvantage, because if you're going to do this, you can't quickly pull it down. But you can do things like song go. And then the final thing that I'll say is that you remember how up at the beginning of the video I mentioned that you should not put the drum flush against the floor. You won't be able to get the bass tone. Well, you can play with that. You can play with lifting the bell. Now this takes a little practice and it takes a little preparation. Like you've got to be ready. You saw how I wasn't ready to do this, but you can. So you can get a little bit of like a talking drum kind of action by doing. But as you hear, it's really just the fundamental that is affected by this. Anyway, there are inevitably many more things you can do, and the only limit is the limit of your own creativity. If you've got something that you think I totally overlooked that's cool to do with a djembe and you want to drop it in the comments, please, we all can learn from that, and I am always on the lookout for something new that I can incorporate to mix it up and get these things going. Let me leave you with just a little taste of some of these things all sort of mixed together to give you a sense of like how the picture all comes together. So. Okay, have fun and see you next time.